to tonight's edition of The Next Word. We're celebrating Black History Month, and it's apropos that we have two very special guests with us. Mark Mitchell, who has the largest private collection of African American history, as well as Mr. Charles Mann, Redskins defense lineman and All-American pro. Gentlemen, welcome.
Nice to be here, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely. This is very special. I'll start with you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
The Washington Post noted that your collection presents the kind of the full range of African American history. It's they noted the monumental, the terrible, and the indelible moments of pride. I want to talk a little bit about those indelible moments of pride, because I read some of I read through the manuscripts, and I was just fascinated. Can we first talk about some of the most poignant, interesting pieces that you found that point to those moments of pride for the African Americans?
Well, I think the piece that I have in the collection that is most precious to me and really kept me going in my 20 years of putting this collection together was the Phyllis Wheatley book, her first edition of poetry.
I read that.
Which was published in London in 1773, even though she lived in Boston. And to see a 19-year-old published in, all over the world. She was, as Skip Gates at Harvard said, she was the Oprah of her time.
Right.
And she was well known and well read in the U.S. and also in Britain and all over really Europe. And in the magazines and newspapers, her poetry appeared, and everyone knew who she was. She even traveled to London as still a slave. She's a slave girl in Boston, traveling to London, and becomes a tourist. Meets Ben Franklin, he meets lords and ladies and so on. And her book is published when she was coming back in September 1773. And her parents, they really were like parents rather than master to her. Probably the best treated slave maybe in American history. She was a daughter to them, really. And she came back and they freed her, but she stayed in their home.
Wow. So you started, when did you start collecting this amazing 4,000 plus?
1991, actually. I met one of the Washington Redskins, Terry Orr, who was a tight end H-back at the time, and we both were reading Before the Mayflower, which is Lerone Bennett Jr.'s textbook on African American history, and just coincidentally we had the same stockbroker, Christine. That's how we met. And
there's always a story.
There's a story, definitely. And we realized, I know I did, how little I knew about African American history. I thought I knew a lot, but after reading that book, I realized how much I didn't. And then Terry bought a piece from me that I had. I was a rare newspaper dealer. I have newspapers going back to the 1600s. But in all the events I have, the inauguration of George Washington and Lincoln and so on in the Revolutionary War, there was a lot of black history. The Dred Scott case, for example, and the Nat Turner slave rebellion in 1831. So Terry bought a piece from me and took on a plane to play the Cardinals, and the other Redskins said, "Where'd you get that?" And eventually I was introduced to my friend Charles Mann and also Art Monk and other people. But Charles and Art especially, both of them, encouraged me, said, you seem to know so much about African American history.
That's only because I didn't know
great.
very much at all myself. So
anybody
sounded like they were an astute scholar when it came to that. But anyway, continue.
Well, they encouraged me. They said, you know so much about it. Why don't you start a collection? And I thought, goodness, I'm a jazz musician. I was thinking of starting a jazz collection, with Miles Davis and Duke Ellington and so on, who I met years ago. But this intrigued me. I thought, I come from a family of stamp collectors and coin collectors and so on. I'm going to do it. So I called every autograph dealer in the country, in the world, and I was associated with Sotheby's and Christie's anyway, and auction houses and collectors. And I started putting together this collection. And the more I acquired, the more I learned, of course. And the knowledge was built up, and you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know dates. You have to know history to be able to acquire more, or you wouldn't know what to look for.
Right, absolutely. And I went to Goree Island off of Senegal. It was probably one of the most moving moments of my life, where all the slaves were taken, of course, and launched from that spot.
Cape Coast Castle.
Cape Coast, right. And to read about it, brought back all those memories of that time that I spent, 15 years ago. And it's, so preserving this history is so critical.
Preserving it is one thing. You have to go out and find it, locate it, preserve it. Of course, you have to, pretty much for me, you have to buy it. No one's donating to me. And put it together, but then it needs to be shared. If only I or Charles or a few people see it, or yourself sees these pieces, what good does it do our children today and our future generations? So it needs to be seen and learned, and since we live in a visual generation, we need to make it visual. That's why a lot of my pieces are framed, and it's meant to be accessible, not meant to be archived in the bowels of a museum or something.
Wow.
But that's why people like Charles are so important, because you can talk about it, and you're seen as a tremendous role model. Plus, you made really history back during the Super Bowl, along with Doug Williams, when you all won. I mean, I think about just even in the locker room, and what it was then, and now it is, of course, today. You can't speak about today, but what it was like then as an African American all-pro football player making history, and now that we're facing the Super Bowl this week, truly that was a monumental, I think, moment as well.
It was
in African American history.
Well, and you're referring to Doug Williams, and Doug Williams in the and that was Super Bowl 22.
Right, 22. Right.
And in Super Bowl 22, as you might remember, that was a strike-shortened season, and then we went on to win the Super Bowl. We played the Denver Broncos in that Super Bowl. We were down 10-0, and Doug Williams, hitting his wide receivers, had just a fantastic second quarter, and we ended up winning that game 42-10. Denver never scored again, and there was a lot of pride amongst our teammates, not just the black players on the team, but in our teammates, to be a part of such a historic event, in Doug Williams, a black quarterback, winning a Super Bowl. Even more important for him, being able to say he's going to Disney World. but that was a wonderful time, and it gave us a platform. And with that platform, now what do? You've got a platform. You've got a launching pad, if you will. Are you going to be just known as a great football player, or what are you going to bring to society? What are you going to do with that platform? And it was a launching pad, obviously, when we talked with Terry Orr and found out that Terry had been talking with this gentleman, Mark Mitchell, and had been collecting some pieces. And obviously, we all ran over to this young man's townhouse and pillaged it and found pieces that we could afford. And all of us came away with tokens and things that we could then learn about. And it seemed like every time I went to Mark's home to look at his pieces and then bring other people over there, I took pride in knowing that somebody was preserving, there was records of stuff that gave me some pride at what my ancestors had done. And so it was really neat. And with the world now, with you're able to get to everything, the internet, we need to display this. That's why we're here today. We're here today because this is an opportunity to bring some attention to something that's really, really important to us.
No, and absolutely. And it's so important for the young people to see this collection. I mean, it's their heritage. It's
He's got some really nice pieces, and because we're in Maryland at a Maryland TV station, we or Mark had the idea, let me bring some pieces that represent Maryland. And so you probably need to tell them about some of the pieces that they'll be looking at here on the screen, some of the pieces that you brought.
And before, let me ask you too, Mark, one of the things I did see was a signed copy of a book by Martin Luther King in 1963.
That's right.
You have that, yes.
Yes.
That's amazing, yes, yes. Truly
That's about all you
remarkable.
can get from King. Again, the King papers were sold recently for $32 million and put in Atlanta. And Boston University has a great amount of his material. So you have to find it as from someone he may have sent the book to, or and there's very little Martin Luther King you can get
Right.
as a collector.
That was, I know you, Charles, have spent, since your retirement from football, you've spent so much time mentoring, children, and I know that using and teaching them about their heritage is so critical. But of course, you teaching it is even more important. The role model.
Yeah, I
element
mean,
is-
I
is-
realize, Christine, that I have that platform, and what am I going to do with it?
Right.
I have a lot of sayings that my kids tell me as a parent of 3, and one of those sayings is that things in life are caught and not taught. So I really come about mentoring by relationally spending time with people.
Right.
You spend that time with them, they catch your good behaviors as well as your
Absolutely.
bad, so you got to be on your guard. But they catch your behaviors, and that's how we begin to inform the next generation. It's not so much by talking, but it's by walking it out.
Absolutely.
And so what great way we are, especially men, we're very visual, and we have an opportunity now to demonstrate and by showing some
Right,
wonderful
we need to do
art
that.
pieces, and I call them art pieces. I know they're historic pieces, but to me it's a work of art.
It is a work
It
of
really
art.
is.
Oh, absolutely.
point.
And when we're going to be taking a short break shortly, but when we do come back, I want to ask you about your nickname, Cement,
Okay.
and also a little bit about your journey to how you got to Washington. Of course, I know you were brought here through the Redskins, but you spent time on the West Coast, and that was different too, as in Reno, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear a little bit about that too, but we'll come back and then we'll talk about how we can further this mission, which I think is a very exciting one. And,
Great.
And
Great.
start to display it. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back. Channel 16, the next word.
There's a monster on the couch.
Even innocent things can trigger an asthma attack. Learn more at noattacks.org.
Please make the monsters go away.
Welcome back to the next word. I'm Christine Warnke, and tonight we have 2 very special guests, Mr. Charles Mann, Redskins defense lineman and All-American Pro, and Mr. Mark Mitchell, who has one of the largest African-American history collections in the United States. Welcome back. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Charles, we left off by, I was asking you about your nickname, Cement. So I know there has to be something behind this, and I thought that was a cement.
Yeah.
C-M-E-N-T.
It's
so-
Rick Walker, who is one of the hardest working men in this town, who does all sorts of things. Well, he was a former Redskin years ago, and when I came into the league, he was a wily veteran, and here's this rookie that was giving this wily veteran a hard time in practices and whatnot, and so he used to get on me about practicing so hard. Why are you coming so hard on me? I'm playing in the football game on Sundays. You're not hardly playing. Don't come at me so hard. He tried every tactic in the book, and he finally, after a couple of years, I started getting it, and he was now about to retire, and I was now becoming that wily veteran, and somehow, because I used to hit pretty hard in practice,
I'm sure you did.
like cement,
Right.
and everybody was calling me C-Man, so he just took C-Man and just turned it into cement because of the hitting, and this had nothing to do with the football game, but this is in practice.
Right.
He was trying to get me to ease up in practice.
Which I'm sure you now have taken that drive and that passion to your new mission in life, which of course is, like, we go back to being an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Mentoring young people. It's so critical, and using the teaching of African American history as a means.
Amen.
And so that turns me back to Mark. I have to say, Mark, you're amazing. I mean, you're a historian. You know, of course, you're a jazz musician. You're a retired Navy officer. I mean, you have many titles and many roles, but you really
He's
committed.
a lot older than he looks.
Yes, no, it's amazing. But he's really committed. He's really committed to this collection. He doesn't look. He looks great. You're really committed to this, which is which is laudable, and we need people like Mark Mitchells in the world.
Amen.
Because we have to preserve that. I mean, I love preserving history. I wrote about it for the District of Columbia. Of course, you're a native Washingtonian, as I am. But going back to your collection, let's talk a little about the collection. Can you give me some really your favorite pieces? Talk about your favorite pieces and what you've brought today and tonight to show the audience.
Certainly, I've another Maryland. To start with Marylanders, as Charles was talking about, brought a signed photograph, a vintage photograph of Frederick Douglass. He signed it in ink. It's a cabinet photograph about the 1880s or so. It's just superb. We framed it so that again, our generations, our children today, and everyone can see who this man was. If they looked at him visually, maybe they'll learn a little about his life. They'll go and delve and actually read a book about Frederick Douglass, because he did it all. There should be a Frederick Douglass. There should be a Frederick Douglass Day in America, in my opinion.
They should. Yeah.
I also brought being a jazz musician, I brought a signed a contract of Billie Holiday.
That's great.
Lady Day, who influenced so many singers that came after her, including my favorite, Nancy Wilson. And then, let's see, we've got Barack Obama as the first black president. But first he was a U.S. senator from Illinois.
Right.
So, who was the first black senator? And I brought a lithograph of the first African-American senator.
Who was that?
It was, I'm glad you asked, Charles. It was Hiram Rhodes Revels from Mississippi. He was a Republican. Back then, everyone were Republicans.
Really?
Again, the Republican Party was the anti-slavery party. The Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party. So Revels was appointed to fill a seat in Mississippi in 1870.
1870.
Wow.
1870.
Wow.
That was the first. There were only two African-American senators in the 19th century. The second was Blanche Kelso Bruce, an escaped slave, like Frederick Douglass was. And he was the first to fill a full 6-year term in 1874. And after that, of course, we had Edward Brooke, Harold Moseley Braun,
right.
and then Barack Obama.
And Roland Burroughs.
Right, almost.
Wow.
Right. I also brought a, got it right here, let's see.
Should you put your gloves on?
I think I should put on my gloves here. I almost reached for that.
Be authentic.
While you're doing it, Mark, let me ask you a question. Going back to Frederick Douglass, because he has there are two museums here in Washington. And can you tell us a little about the story? I mean, he moved, I know the one on Capitol Hill very well, which is a remarkable place. If you haven't visited it, Charles.
I have not.
Oh, you have not?
I have not.
Oh, you have to go, yeah.
Yeah, I will.
It's restored.
Yeah. Most people don't know about that. Most people don't know about
It's
that.
only 3 blocks from the Supreme Court.
Now, do they have information in there on him about
Yes, a
his
lot.
name being changing his name, and the story that you told us about in the break about Frederick Douglass?
I believe they have a number of things in the museum, and they might have this piece.
Well, I just teased that, Mark, so you have to, don't leave the audience hanging about his name.
Right. Frederick Douglass's actual name, he was born on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Really?
In 1818. And his actual name was Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. And when he was 20, he managed to escape from Baltimore as a sailor, disguised as a sailor, and he went to New Bedford, Massachusetts, where he ended up. And someone said, "Your master will probably be coming after you if you don't change your name." So he decided to change it to Frederick Douglass with 2 S's.
Yes, that's something.
Very authentic.
I know we're going off a little bit, but one other person that I was fascinated with was Thomas Fuller in your manuscript.
Do you have any pieces?
The mathematician, the genius, the
Oh,
mathematical.
yeah, in the
genius.
newspaper.
Mhm.
Okay, you read my
I read all your
439 page
439
collection.
pages. Yes.
She
Right.
came prepared,
Yes.
I
Mark.
came prepared.
Very good. It was a test.
It was a test, right?
No,
It doesn't-
no, it's in a newspaper, there were geniuses, African American, just geniuses, and in their heads they can multiply numbers that would take a calculator or a computer to do. It was absolutely, Thomas Fuller was one of them.
Well, like in 10 seconds, it says he was able, no, in a minute and a half, he was able to calculate how many seconds a man lives who is 70 years, 17 days, and 12 hours old.
Wow.
In a minute and a half, he was able to
He
calculate
must have had
that
a lot of time on his hands.
in a minute and a half.
That's not something I would want to
Really
ponder.
Amazing. But let me tell you about Alex Haley.
Yes.
Again, another Marylander, of
Another
course.
Maryland, right.
Anyway, he wrote Roots. He wrote the autobiography of Malcolm X. What I have with me today are a couple of pieces. This is 1964 journal. Looks like a little notebook, a child's notebook.
amazing.
Looks like one of my notebooks.
Looks like,
Looks like one of
it
them.
may be your notebook. No.
You said it's Alex
It says
Haley's.
Alex Haley. He
Right.
wrote his name on here, and this is
Oh,
his
amazing.
typical green ink, which he wrote in.
Why did he write in green?
That's what he liked to write with. I don't know. I didn't ask.
Okay.
But so did Langston Hughes. He
Wow.
used a green pen a lot of times. It started in 1964, a logbook, in July 1964. And he has, he's a working journalist trying to make a living. And he's writing articles about Miles Davis, a great jazz trumpeter, and he's collaborating with Malcolm X on the autobiography of Malcolm X at this time. He has Betty Shabazz's diet in here because he's trying to lose some weight. His taxi
We should
fare.
take that.
Wow.
His taxi fare.
How much was his taxi fare?
Oh, 75 cents to go somewhere.
Okay.
He interviewed Dr.
That was pretty
King.
high.
It was.
That was pretty high. That's
1964.
1964, 75 cents. Come on now. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
And they were silver quarters too. But
He
there's-
interviewed
he interviewed Dr. King.